The people of Israel are casting their ballots for a second time this year. Voting opened early this morning. The last election happened in the month of April. The incumbent, Benjamin Netanyahu, formed a government then, but he couldn't form a coalition. The government collapsed, which is why they're having a repeat election now. This contest has two main contenders. First, the incumbent, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, leader of the Likud party, the right-wing party. This is a make-or-break election for him. Netanyahu has been Israel's longest-serving prime minister, overtaking the country's founding father, David Ben-Gurion. He has held power for 4 terms, and this result could very well decide his political future. The battle has not been easy. Netanyahu faces 3 separate cases of corruption. He could very well be indicted, but he's fighting to secure a record 5th term. While casting his vote, he made a simple appeal to the people of Israel.
הנשיא טראמפ אמר אתמול שאלה בחירות צמודות. יכול לאשר לכם הבוקר הן צמודות מאוד. לקרוא לכל אזרחי ישראל לבוא ולהצביע. כשאני ואשתי באנו להצביע, לא אומר לכם מה. שיהיה בהצלחה. תודה.
Netanyahu's challenger is also a Benjamin, better known as Benny Gantz. He is from the Blue and White Party. He was the 20th military chief of Israel. In the last election, he secured 35 seats. Netanyahu too had 35, but he was better placed to secure a majority. So Giantz had conceded defeat, and now he has another chance to win power. He has promised to give Israel a new direction.
This is a very important day. This is what democratic country is all about. Everybody go put his vote. Let's hope for change. Let's hope for new hope. Thank you very much.
As many as 30 parties are contesting this election. They're competing for 120 seats in the Knesset. The majority mark is 61, but neither Netanyahu nor Gantz have a clear path to form a government. No party in Israel's history has secured a majority on its own. Coalition governments are the norm here. One man could hold the key to power, Avigdor Lieberman, a former ally of Netanyahu. He could very well play kingmaker after the votes are counted. Lieberman has announced that he wants to see the 2 largest factions, led by Netanyahu and Gantz, to form the government.
אנחנו נתמוך אך ורק בממשלה לאומית ליברלית רחבה המורכבת מישראל ביתנו, ליכוד וכחול לבן. שום ממשלה אחרת אנחנו לא נצטרף, לא נתמוך ולא נהיה חלק ממנה. מול האתגרים שאנחנו ניצבים מולם היום, מדינת ישראל זקוקה לממשלה רחבה.
Once the result is out, the ball will be in President Reuven Rivlin's court. The leader best placed to form a coalition will be asked to form the government. He will have 28 days to prove majority. An extension of 14 days is also allowed. But if the first attempt fails, the Israeli president can ask the leader of another party to try. And with us from Tel Aviv is WION's West Asia Bureau Chief Daniele Pagani. He is joining us live. Good evening, Daniele. Is this going to be another very close result? Is this going down to the wire again?
Good evening to you, Palki, and good evening to all our viewers. So it is definitely going down to the wire, and even further, I would say. This is a battle which will be fought on a handful of votes and a handful of seats. It will be one of the smaller parties in Israel to determine who will actually be in charge of the next Israeli government. The system gives a lot of power to small parties, and the people are not very keen to give the vote to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu or Benny Gantz. Many of them to whom I have spoken did not see them capable of actually organizing a governing coalition, and therefore they turned to smaller parties and to try to preserve their very own interest. The Israeli society is very multi-layered, and there are many small parties representing particular segments of this society, and it seems that this time they will hold an enormous amount of power. The voter turnout, as you pointed out correctly, is slightly higher than the April elections, but we do not know particularly who's going to get this vote until the voting counts. So it is really going down to the wire.
Right. You were here in the last election in April and you're here covering this one too. What else do the voters say? Is there electoral fatigue or are these people ready to see another coalition drama play out?
I have to say that in the early hours of the morning and yesterday, all the people I have spoken to were very disaffected. They didn't want to go out and vote. There was electoral fatigue. But then today, slowly, with hours going by, they changed their mind and they understood that anyway, voting for an election is a democratic exercise. And therefore, not voting is definitely wasting an opportunity to decide who's going to run your very own country for the next years or so. They did turn out and vote. All the people I have spoken called me back and said, you know, why we decided actually that it is very much worth voting during these elections. And we have seen this in the numbers. The turnover is slightly higher than the April 2018. The Israeli society is also very politically conscious. They wouldn't let an election go without taking part into the voting process.
Indeed, and very strongly opinionated too. Netanyahu has made some controversial promises in the course of this campaign. How do the Israeli Arabs view this? Are they also participating in bigger numbers than before?
Well, here we have a very different scenario. The only data that we have, the only reliable data that we have is at 2 p.m. today. So a few hours back, nearly 20% of the Arab Israelis went out to vote. The Arab parties, the four main Arab parties, want at least 60% of the Arab voters to go out. But this is not realistic as of now, because if a few hours ago it was only 20%, it's not absolutely credible to say that it is going to reach 60%. The Yard is affected. They do not believe that taking part in these elections, in these Israeli elections, or any election in Israel for that matter, is actually beneficial for them. And these despite the very big promises that Benjamin Netanyahu did to annex the Jordan Valley, which is going to affect thousands of Palestinians.
Daniele, we'll leave it at that. The voting's still on and the counting will begin immediately after. Thanks very much for that update. We'll keep coming to you for the very latest from Tel Aviv. Now that we know what's happening on the ground, let's also give you a ready reckoner on this election. Politics anywhere in the world can be extremely complicated. So we've broken down this election in key points in less than 2 minutes.
Why is the country going to polls again? In the April elections, Netanyahu failed to gather a majority government. As a second shot, Netanyahu forced parliament to dissolve, triggering repeat elections. What is different this time? Netanyahu's former defense minister, Avigdor Lieberman, prevented a coalition earlier. Lieberman has the support of secular voters. Who is Netanyahu's main challenger? Netanyahu's main challenger remains Israel's former army chief, Benny Gantz. However, Lieberman is likely to have a say over who becomes Israel's next leader. What will happen? While both Netanyahu and Gantz may come out ahead, it's even possible they will join together under a unity government. The big wild card is another stalemate, which could lead to a third election in January. What has Netanyahu promised? Israeli sovereignty in the Jordan Valley and 30% annexation of the occupied West Bank, which Palestinians want as a future state. What's the role of smaller parties? Avigdor Lieberman of the right-wing secular Yisrael Beitenu party is an ally turned rival of Netanyahu. He could end up holding the balance of power. The role of Arab Israeli voters. Arab citizens of Israel could deprive Netanyahu of a majority if there's a robust turnout of the minority community. How will the results affect India? Anti-terrorism cooperation, military technology and weapons lie at the core of India-Israel friendship, which has remarkably grown during Narendra Modi's earlier tenure. Status quo is likely to remain the same.